Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Phil Penarski here with the Wood TV Live Desk. Hope you're having a great start to your day so far. Digital reporter Matt Jaworowski is here once again to recap the final part in his series into the PBB Disaster that took place in 1973. Matt, thank you so much for coming back on. We're very excited to talk about this series in general and also this final part.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
And this final part, you know, obviously we've spent the past month kind of discussing the entire series so far that can be found right now on woodtv.com, actually. The first part, of course, dealt with, you know, that initial shipping error that kind of caused this whole mess. Now this final one really looks more into where we are today. So, Matt, I guess that just leads me into the question, where do we stand today with the PBB disaster?
Right. So the final part of the series, when the PBB disaster unfolded in the 70s, it kind of came and went. So within a year, when it was first discovered, a lot of people across the state paid special attention to the meat and the dairy they bought. But within a matter of months or even a couple of years, like, that had kind of withered away. Obviously, for the farmers, it was a lot bigger of a deal. It took them a lot longer to rebound, the industry as a whole to rebound. And that was kind of parts 2 and 3. We kind of shared the impact that so many of those farmers and people in the industry felt. But today, it's just a story. We really don't have to deal with PBB in our everyday lives. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of us, now that we're a couple generations removed from that main exposure, even if we have PBB in our bodies, it's an extremely small amount. Nothing that I believe would be really on any health radars right now. But there are some places, some communities that are still dealing with PBB, primarily St. Louis, which is it's a small city in Gratiot County where the chemical was produced. And then some people, whether they're families of farmers or families of employees that worked at that chemical plant, are still dealing with PBB exposure and the health impacts that they've seen that have even carried through those generations. So that's kind of what we really get into here for.
Mm-hmm. And it also, there's another part in that story, Matt, that kind of also delves into just what's being done today to sort of help out, whether it's helping those farmers that are still being impacted or really to help prevent this from happening again. What is sort of being done now?
So in St. Louis, so there's a couple of key ways to look at this. So in St. Louis, believe it or not, even though this all happened 50 years ago, the chemical plant involved shut down 45 years ago. The site of that chemical plant to this day is still an EPA Superfund site. The plant itself was shut down in 78. Over the few years after that, it was demolished. The EPA was there to bury it and cap it, thinking that they trapped in all that contamination. EPA left. In those next 15 years or so, the community still understood that there were problems there. And so we do explore that in part 4 of this series, of how there is a group of professors at nearby Alma College that did some testing and were able to provide some test results that were enough to gauge the EPA's interest and brought them back out there. They did their own testing and confirmed that, yes, we do have major problems here. And so still today, they're working on cleaning up that soil. There is some good news. There appears to be an end in sight for that project coming up the next few years. We get into more of the details of that in this upcoming story.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, you know, obviously it's good news to hear that this thing that happened 50 years ago, you know, we're starting to learn a lot more about it, being able to maybe provide some more help for those who are being impacted by it. But you also spoke with a professor out in California who said that this may just be a matter of time before we potentially see something like this happening again. Obviously, we don't wish that to happen, but, you know, what is sort of the likelihood? What is your feeling after really talking to that professor and just kind of understanding that, you know, this could happen again?
Right. Her name is Dr. Elena Konis. She works for UC Berkeley. She's a professor of journalism, and she also has a background in environmental journalism, too. So she's not just familiar with this story, but environmental disasters all across the country and all across the world for the last however many years And one of the points that she really drove home when I was interviewing her and talking to her was that in the last 70, 80 years, we've developed so many chemicals or chemical compounds, but just varieties of those chemical compounds, that it's really impossible to do the thorough testing we need to know that everything is safe. Um, One of the quotes I have in the article, I believe she gave a number. It's in the hundreds of thousands of those chemical compounds. When we talk about DDT or PBB or PFAS, which is the big one here in West Michigan right now,
Mhm.
and really around the world, um, there it's not just that that's one chemical. There are sometimes between dozens, hundreds, or in case of PFAS, thousands of different forms of that chemical compound. So there's so much minute testing. And then when you take it a step further, this is what she mentions, and I included this quote in the story of you don't interact with one chemical at any one time. It's chemical A and chemical B, or depending on where you are, it's chemical C, at what ratio, as far as your personal genetic makeup, how does this impact you as opposed to impacting someone else? So the fact that there's just so much out there in a field that's continuing to grow, her mindset is that it's kind of a matter of time before something else big happens. We're seeing this play out with PFAS now. It's so she's wondering, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, what's a chemical that we're using right now, manufacturing right now, putting into our products and introducing into our environment that we're not going to realize until far down the road that this is a major contaminant and potential health issue.
Right, definitely something to keep an eye on. Matt, you also have spent a lot of time obviously researching this series and doing all the work to put it together and then releasing these 4 separate stories that cover incredible topics and very detailed amount of time. What really has stuck out to you after all the information you've sort of taken in and put out into these stories? What's something that's really stuck out to you that may actually stick with you for quite a bit once this series is further down the line?
Right. I think there's a lot to take away. First of all, I appreciate you for saying that. I mean, this really is. I spent a good 3 months
Right.
researching, digging into this project, reading through books and old press clippings, and I can't tell you the number of interviews I did, talking to people and experts and all this stuff. One of my big takeaways is uh, kind of what Dr. Kona said of like this is something we need to be really paying attention to, is the environmental and health impact of working with all these different chemical compounds. But also, I think we need to look at the city of St. Louis and how that community has responded to all of this.
Hmm.
And we do touch on that a little bit in the final piece here, PBB4. I call it PBB4, the fourth report in the series, um, of how they came together, put pressure on the EPA and government officials to make sure this cleanup gets done. Before the 2021 infrastructure bill, which is what really kind of is propelling this project forward right now and putting a firm kind of, they expect the cleanup to be done by 2026. Without that, there was no firm end of the timeline, and it's on the Citizen Task Force group out there that is really holding the EPA's feet to the fire. So not just it's not just to present these kind of stories to be depressing, to dig up old memories, talk about this major mistake that happened, but also to highlight the fact that uh, the people in these communities, you still have a voice, you can still have your voice be heard, and you can hold these people to account. So
Hmm.
hopefully that's one of the lessons that we take away out of this.
Right, absolutely. And Matt, kind of on the flip side of that, obviously having all this information, doing all this research, putting together these 4 separate parts in the series, you covered it all, really. But is there anything that you maybe still have questions about after doing all this research, writing these stories that you want answered, and maybe you're going to be looking forward to doing more stories on and really looking more deeply into?
Right. As crazy as it sounds, there's still so much more to this story that I wasn't even able to include in our pieces. Unfortunately, a lot of the central players in all this are now long past. Alpha Clark, who is kind of one of the main characters in the third report of the series, just passed away last year. But so there are people that I didn't have a chance to talk to get their firsthand account of what happened in their interactions and all this. But there's definitely other stories out there. I mean, we're still going to be following St. Louis. We're still going to be following. I mean, Dr. Michelle Marcus and her team at Emory are still studying PBB, the health impacts we're seeing now that we're 3 generations removed from the people that were first really exposed. So they're still finding new things. More will come of this.
Right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing what else you decide to report on in this series. Matt, once again, thank you so much for coming on the live desk. I want to remind everybody that if you haven't checked out any of the 4 parts in Matt's PBB disaster story, I highly encourage you to do so. They're all live right now over on our website, woodtv.com. If you're watching us on Facebook, you can find a link to that 4th and all-important part of the series that will lead you to the other 3 as well. Matt, once again, thank you so much for coming on the live desk today.
Anytime. Talk to you later, Phil.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm Phil Penarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.